everyone. Yes?
Hi, there were three areas that came to mind that I just wanted to think about including. The first being the one in Volzek, the Buchner, which is sort of a festival of idiots in some ways between that and Utah at the end and whatnot. And then sort of Parsifal, the fool who too compassionate they was. And then finally sort of Andy Warhol, who very much appropriated the idiot as a way of sort of dealing with being, a promotional artist, in ways like that. And in some way, I think that those three archetypes may have more to do with what we think of as idiots / fools, if you can see those two terms as sort of synonymous, which I might, than necessarily Dostoevsky, which seems almost sort of subtracted from those, from these together.
Thank you. That's very apt and astute, certainly, and one of the facets that I was trying to shine and show you tonight was something that happens in a certain type of philosophical attachment, which is at once to disavow the very thing that it needs in order to kind of test and secure its existence. So it's not only that philosophy ravenously goes after certain creatures. Nietzsche turns this around or aside by saying, I love them, I love to chow down on my little enemy, topoi and themes and so on and so forth. That's why I put the yummy in there. But philosophy simultaneously disavows, needs, recruits, abuses, and so there's a very complicated relationship of need and faking foundations, faking priorities and origins. After that kind of, let's say, interrogation that does require more time and even a more complicated itinerary that I didn't dare impose on you on the first inaugural lecture. I know Zizek can do that, and Badiou and others with their heavy, serious readings. But you're right, the types that you just set up would be extraordinarily felicitous, especially, say, in Büchner's. Of course, we left out Lentz, which would be top-notch. I would Lentz and certainly Wojciech, whom you did name, especially also because Wojciech is a soldier, a dumbass soldier, and that would be especially. Yes, go ahead.
The play that confronts
the figure of the idiot, yeah. But who's an anamorph and reflector of Wojciech as well, which is to say the figure of the soldier who's inserted in a dumbass, horrific system that can't be deciphered, or even the police, which Büchner is very alert to already. You can't ask the police or the figure of the police to produce a discourse on what it's doing. If a police starts moving in on you, in case some of you know about this, you can't say, first of all, I'm not saying, you can't say, as you would accuse me of new agey, let's talk about this before you put those things on me. But you cannot expect a discursive or reflective response from a cop. The cop does something according to a certain mechanicity that Büchner was very sensitive to, and that is non-productive of something that would be reflective. Nonetheless, that mechanicity is fragmented in the play that you mentioned in terms of different types of idiocy. Parsifal would make one perhaps move toward the Nietzschean figure of the buffoon, which Nietzsche loved, the buffoon, who's not entirely dissociable from that locus of recondite knowledge in Shakespeare, the jester. I mean, who knows more, who has a more privileged access to some type of knowing than the fool or the jester, and the buffoon would be the Nietzschean upgrade in a certain way. Nietzsche used to love to say that he was a buffoon, and that stages a certain relation to truth-telling, to the performance and breakdown of some types of German gravity. Andy Warhol is, of course, a necessary point that we would want to discuss at length, especially also in terms of his tribe, including Valerie Solanas and others. You're absolutely right. Those would be a good way to start launching a typology of, let's say, crucial idiocy, maybe.
Yes, it's one of our rules. If one of our professors wants to talk, they can cut in, so I will call.
Since I was mentioned, I would just like to make 2-3 short notes. First, I always like to take the side of the bad guys. So when you mention that policeman who just takes notes and so on, well, I'm tempted to say thanks God. Because this is how my associations run. There was, as far as I know, only one serious attempt to make the entire, at least in ideology, police judgment system more comprehensive of a totality of the person. This was done, sorry I don't know the names, but I have them in my computer, with some phenomenological criminologists supporting the Nazis. They said, in contrast to the abstract Jewish blah 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 criminology where you just objectify and just take notes as your policeman, a true Nazi judge judges a person. He can therefore move above these mechanical rules and so on. So there are situations where I prefer an idiotic policeman. I would be much more afraid of a policeman who would try phenomenologically to grasp me. But to go to another thing. First, a little bit of a defense, and I'm sure you would agree with philosophy. I totally agree with you. This is a wonderful story. It would be even wonderful to include also not only directly from Enlightenment to Nietzsche, but for example, one of the pearls, as you probably also know, of Hegel is for me, where he treats idiots and does psychology in the beginning of the third part of Encyclopedia. But what I'm saying is this, but aren't the poets who like to celebrate idiots in a more refined way even more exploitative? Namely, maybe you have the same, I have this collection of complete works, a couple of letters with Zurkam Taschenbucher Wissenschaft on Kaspar Hauser. You remember there at the end, as an appendix, you get all the poems. It's a nightmare, how a terribly suffering guy, and now what you learn from the poems is that you really should be lucky, you are the truly free one, and so on. So let's not leave poetry off the hooks too easily here. Poetry has its own dirty secrets. But just a concluding remark, where I wanted to develop is also what you started touching towards the end, namely this problem of typology. You're focused on one type of it, which is this half excluded, and you pointed out correctly. The mystery is that stage where, in a way, symbolic order, language is already here, but what we call phenomenologically the experience of not so much meaning as sense is not yet here. It's as if you have, in contrast to all what Gadamer and Heidegger say, language at its pre-hermeneutic level. This is what I think is the mystery of this level. So apart from this, what would you say, would you agree immediately two other neatly opposed types of idiocy or stupidity, we should distinguish them, let's not go into this, came to me. One would have been the idiot as hyper-intelligent idiot. The idiot of one who has abstract knowledge of logical language, but as we put it, doesn't get the point. For example, I am often this kind of idiot. I remember my own story when I first visited the United States. A waiter told me, how was, they usually tell you in Lower Manhattan at least, no? How was your day? Did you have a nice day? I was an idiot. I took it literally, no? I answered, well, pretty bad because I had a bad flight. And he looked at me like, who is this idiot?